Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is May 1st. It's going to be May, as they say, and it's Wednesday also, so that means it's all about the news. What have we seen in the news over the last 7 days? What has piqued our interest? If you're new here, we don't usually share. We didn't today share what the news stories that piqued our individual interest. So we have Beth, Jyunmi, Karl, Andy, and I'm Brian. And we're going to do our best over the next 30-ish minutes to just kind of bring you the stories we think were the most interesting over the last 7 days. There's been a lot of cool things that have happened. And yeah, that's the idea of the show. So as always, I like to throw it out there and say, like, does anybody have that burning story that Jyunmi is already shaking his head yes and up and down? So Jyunmi, let me pass it over to you. What do you got for us that you want to talk about?
Okay, so this is like a two-pronged story. The No Fakes Act is being discussed in Congress. There's a panel being talked about this morning, in fact, about pushing through this No Fakes Act. It's a bill that essentially protects artists from just deep fakes being used against them, deep fakes being used for unauthorized commercial purposes, and just generally trying to address this rising concern for both commercially and personally. The key takeaway that I've gotten through so far is there's a portion in the bill that talks about explicit digital rights or digital copyrights. So this is one of the things that I know I've been talking about and people have been talking about recently, especially with groups like Metaphysics and Clear Angle Studios helping the CAA, which is a large agency body in Hollywood, to create what they call the CAA Vault, which is creating AI clones of artists. And so this has been really prevalent in the news over the last few months about how these industries would really deal with AI cloning. Because I mean, we've done AI generated music episodes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've talked about the Taylor Swift issue a few months ago, right? And now. So now this act that was created back in 2023 is being addressed, and Congress is addressing this bill. And so like pretty much every news agency's been there. I was watching the PBS one, but what makes this a two-pronged story for me is one of the artists that was actually speaking to the committee today was an artist named Twigs. Okay, I'm not familiar with this artist, but apparently they are, fairly popular. But a lot of the points they were making, really hit home for the voice of the artist. So I was really glad that they were able to lend that voice. But what makes it interesting is, I think in an advent to get ahead of any potential issues, Twigs themselves created an AI clone that they're using for their own social media campaigns and their own campaigning and branding and things like that. So I think this is a great example of artists taking advantage or trying to get ahead of potential future issues. So in creating their own AI clones, and this all goes back to like the CAA Vault as well. So, and they're a performing artist, the musician, and things like that. So this is good to see not just one form of art trying to be covered. But yeah, so the Fakes Act is really big news, and I want everyone to really pay close attention, because what comes out of what the final bill that is accepted is probably going to lay the foundation of how we approach AI cloning, digital likeness rights, and all of those kinds of things for many years.
And we just saw this come out just as an extra story to this. There was news in the last week that I was going to bring up from the artist Drake, who put out a diss track against another Kendrick Lamar. And on the diss track, now he didn't release it outside of like on YouTube or whatever, but the song starts with Tupac, and it's an AI version of Tupac, and then an AI version of Snoop Dogg. Well, he's still alive, but Tupac obviously isn't. So the estate of Tupac Shakur basically sent a 24-hour cease and desist, and Drake pulled the song down, which is called Tailor Made. Now, I'll be honest with you, you can still go find the song if you're so inclined. I did, because I was curious to hear how similar to an old Tupac song. To me, I don't think for an artist who's familiar with his rapping style, or even Snoop Dogg's rapping style, that you would necessarily be thrown off. But we also know these are small hills to overcome, and that in time, these little, idiosyncrasies and stuff like that would be taken care of. And I think very soon it'd be very tough to hear. For instance, when there was the whole George Carlin thing, not music, but it was stand-up comedy, that 1 hour special blew me away. Now, that's different because I hadn't just heard George Carlin speak in the last probably 4 or 5 years or whatever. So I personally could not pick up on it. Maybe if you were a huge George Carlin fan, you could. But I just wanted to put this out, Jyunmi, because you were talking about the law side of it. This isn't just, evildoer people who are using a Tupac or whatever. This is a major music artist like Drake using another dead major rapper from history as AI, and putting it out on a song. And there was a cease and desist, and he complied with it and took it down. But we have artists using artists. So is this going to go to, like you said, the ability of like Tupac's estate being able to say, look, we will license this out, no different than Elvis. We saw that years ago with the hologram versions of Elvis, and Tupac actually had one too, believe it or not, back in like the early 2000s, I think. So I agree with you. It'll be like interesting to see how these estates take care of this. It could be another huge revenue stream for, Elvis is going to be fine, right? But a huge revenue stream for maybe artists who have passed. Maybe there's an estate, and there is a new way now to license their AI likeness in a responsible way that brings money back to that estate as it should. So it's not just being used. So just wanted to bring that up because I was like dead on with what I saw going on with Drake.
You're spot on. That's definitely a commercial option for them. I think what it's important in the bill that this No Fakes Act is it establishes the fact that they can. Right? Because digital copies or digital representations, AI clones of their performances are not covered by likeness. They're not covered by, there is no explicit right for this kind of situation. So we want that so that people have a little more control over their likeness in with these new technologies.
And before we move on to other news, I just want to put this because I knew somebody. I'm just so glad Sahel Khan put this comment up. Who said who says Tupac isn't, meaning he's not dead. So thank you, because I stopped in my tracks for actually saying that as part of it. So I'm thrilled to see that there's actually a comment about that, because it made me laugh, because I was about to say the same thing. Allegedly, but I think we can all agree Tupac Shakur passed on many years ago. Okay, let's move on to other news. Who's got other news to share?
I have one. It's sort of like popped up a little bit more this morning. I'm not sure if it's a data flaw, but can I share my screen here?
Sure.
All right. Let's see. So for those of us listening, what you're seeing is StatsCan global stats. Now, again, not sure if this is legit, but if you can see here, Google's search engine share in the United States of America fell dramatically, or it has been falling, because it's usually around 90%. So we're seeing 87 in December, or 87 in January, then to 87 again in February. Now it's 86 in March, but then it significantly fell, and it's a pretty big fall in April. And you can see what's funny here is Bing has jumped up to 13%. Now, we obviously have to see this over the next couple of months, but there's a lot of people jumping on this saying that the reason for this and the reason for Bing popping up and Yahoo, I'm not even sure why Yahoo's popping up, but is because of things like ChatGPT that is now eating into the search engine market share, where people are using Microsoft Copilot, I don't think it's still called Bing, and other tools to find their information. I think there was a post today by the former CMO of Zapier, Kieran, I can't remember his last name. He was saying that like people are more focused on an answer engine, not a search engine. So there's a big debate right now between, I think in the marketing community, right? There's people are like, oh, Google will still be the biggest thing because people still want choice. Then there's another side that says, well, people, yeah, the choices suck because when you look at Google, you get ads all over the place. So I'd rather have an answer. And so there was a really good podcast between Eli Schwartz and somebody else talking about the benefits. And I can see both sides have made total sense. Like there's certain things, search queries that like, oh, I actually want a couple of choices versus I just want the answer, or I just want to pop out the answer. So it's fascinating what is I want to see what happens in May, in June, to see if this is normalized or if there's a flaw in the data and goes back up to 90%. This is no news at all.
And so when it went from March to April, March was 80.
The United States was 86, which is still kind of low. And then it went down to 77.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
so maybe it wasn't complete data there. Yeah, that's a good question. Like, because it's just May 1st today. So was there incomplete data for April and we just don't have the full story, or did it really drop? Because I agree with you, that is a significant drop. I mean, but look, with players like Perplexity, Arc, others that are out there, there's people I think are starting to understand that there's other ways now that you do not have to just rely on a typical search result. And by the way, it's still great for a lot of things. I still use Chrome as my predominant browser. I'm not one of these people who's like, I left it for Perplexity and I've never gone back. I personally haven't been able to do that. I still feel like the claws of Chrome are a little too hooked in to what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I'm okay with that. But it's like, I definitely, like a lot of us, go over to Perplexity for different types of answers. I'll even say yesterday, and it could just be totally just random, that my daughter asked me first. She said, Dad, is hair color a characteristic or a trait? And I was like, ooh, I want to say trait. I was like, I feel like it's a trait or whatever. She's like, I was like, but if you ask me why, I don't know that I can back that up. So she goes to the Echo and she says, she says, what is hair color a characteristic or trait? There was a little longer of a pause than normal. And then the answer that came back was well thought out, like ChatGPT thought out, not just blah. Like I looked this up in the internet or whatever.
Give you a recipe?
No. What's that?
It didn't give you a recipe?
No, but it gave out a well thought out answer. And I thought, oh, has there been maybe an update? I don't know. It piqued my interest. Maybe there hasn't been. It's not news because I have no idea. But we've been waiting for these series, for these Echoes to get smarter because they sound dumb by comparison, even though 10, 15 years ago they were the best thing we had. But now we're like, I don't know, that's not as good as I could get out of an LLM. I don't know. I almost felt like either it just happened to be perfectly said on the internet and it pulled that answer back, which totally could be the case. Or maybe there's been some slight tweaks in the back end. I don't know. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up to it. But
so I haven't seen any announcements about Alexa, but Amazon did switch their code assistant and announce that new branding is Q. And there's a Q for coders, for developers. There's Q for business, and there's Q for something else. And I don't remember what the third one was. But they're doing like Microsoft Copilot kind of thing where everything is going to be Q. And that did come out today, maybe.
So, Beth, the thing you were thinking about as number 3, I believe, is Q apps. which
Yes.
is designed for non-technical users and is basically a natural language prompt system for generating applications from company data. And when they say applications, I think they mean automated queries, about that. I don't know that they actually have app functionality available through Q apps yet in natural language format, but that's very interesting. So, and it rivals GitHub. So the assertions are anyway that GitHub, which is an amazing co-pilot for coders and developers, which is a Microsoft product, has been the go-to, and now Amazon's Q developer is the next wave of that trend. That trend's happening out there.
Didn't Microsoft just release something with Copilot, like GitHub Copilot yesterday or 2 days ago? Because I remember Satya on his feed said something. It's like, "Oh, welcome to blah 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 blah."
I didn't see that. Karl will find it.
Yeah, I'm just
in terms of some other new quick news here while we're pivoting. OpenAI and Google both had sort of news that are similar, and that's that we continue to see a trend towards these larger companies like OpenAI and Google doing contracts or doing whatever you want to call them and paying for access to past subscriptions or past publications, excuse me. So the one for OpenAI is with Financial Times. And basically there was just an article that came out 2 days ago that said the Financial Times today announced a strategic partnership and licensing agreement. That's what I was trying to think of, licensing, with OpenAI, a leader in artificial intelligence, to enhance ChatGPT with attributed content, help improve this model's usefulness by incorporating the Financial Times journalism, and collaborate on developing new AI products and features for Financial Times readers. Further in that article, it talks about how the Financial Times also became enterprise users, which I think we've seen this 2 or 3 times where, like, in the same announcement, it's like, by the way, we just signed up 400 people on the enterprise account. And also now we have a strategic partnership for them to use our stuff. So it seems like money's going both ways, in my opinion, but who knows how they're doing this stuff. And then also Google just had another small one with News Corp talking about how they're paying roughly $5 to $6 million a year to have access to AI content through News Corp. But then in that same article, there was a quote from News Corp saying, "We absolutely do not have an AI content licensing deal with Google, though we do have a number of partnerships with Google across our businesses," a News Corp spokesman told Reuters. But it seems to say at the top of the article that they pay between 5 and 6. But I guess what it's trying to say is, like, okay, this was under a pre-existing partnership or relationship, and that will continue. And I guess that spokesperson was kind of saying there's nothing new here. This is something that's maybe been going on for a while. But anyway, we continue to see this trend. Wanted to bring up both of them because I think we'll continue to see more and more and more of these types of announcements where there's a strategic partnership, right, between these large companies so that they don't get in hot water. And rightfully, it's the right thing to do, right? If you're doing stuff on ChatGPT and it pulls back financial information, yeah, I want that to be cited as well to the Financial Times. And I want to know that even though that's great for me that it's being cited, I do want to feel better as a user that the Financial Times is being compensated appropriately for me getting that answer faster through ChatGPT. So I'm happy to see these. I hope we see more of them. There's money to go around. I don't think anybody's going to go broke over this. So keep paying for the rights to this content. It makes it a better user experience for all of us.
And on the other side, Brian, I also found some news where a newspaper group called the Alden Capital Group, they own a bunch of newspapers, but all of them are now suing OpenAI and Microsoft for the exact same reason. Yep. So we may just see this merry-go-round keep on going until there's a settlement across the board. It does give me the thought, though, we might have to be a little wary of that because we just got to make sure that those kinds of relationships in terms of licensing the information and whatnot doesn't turn into influence. So if OpenAI, for example, has all the newspapers and all the publications, all of their data, then everything's controlled on the OpenAI side. So again,
Well,
the same argument as open source software and things like that. We just have to checks and balances across the board here.
right. And that's one of the reasons that I prefer Perplexity as that, because Perplexity is pulling from a wide variety of sources. And if ChatGPT has to license its sources individually, that by definition limits the pool of where that information is coming from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good
All
point.
right, I have a couple of things I'd like to talk about. First, I want to make a meta comment about AI news on our weekly Wednesday news show, and then I'll make a comment about Meta. But there's a third thing too. That's just another trend. So my meta comment is that we've gotten kind of addicted to the blockbuster news announcements of major breakthrough, explosive developments, and we're not seeing that this week. And I think increasingly we're going to see news channeling on these different trends or tracks that are developments that are occurring broadly in the world or the ecosystem of AI applications and companies, et cetera. And so one of those such trends is the shrinking of models to get them to be running on phones. And so there's news this week about Meta delivering a framework that allows running the Llama open source models on iPhones and Galaxy devices. And they even show that they can get, with a 7 billion parameter sized model, their quantization toolkit allows that to run on an iPhone at 11 tokens per second. Now, let's put that in perspective. That's slow. 11 tokens per second compares now to, let's take one of the fastest large language models running on specific hardware, and that's Grok, G-R-O-Q, right? They run at 800 plus tokens per second. So doing 11 tokens per second, you can imagine, is a much slower process, but it's still running locally on your phone. Now, the second major trend that we've been observing is that Microsoft has been planting data centers and investments in various international regions in what appears to be a geographic campaign to really make Microsoft the dominant player in a lot of these developing and or just foreign countries. So we talked about Microsoft's 1.5 billion investment in a company in Abu Dhabi to address the Arabic market, the Arabic speaking market. And that was a major investment, like $1.5 billion. Well, then just this week, they announced a $1.7 billion commitment to Indonesia's AI infrastructure. And they're going to, then the next day, I didn't see in the news the actual dollar number, but they announced that they're building Thailand's first data center and investing in its AI infrastructure. And they pledged in this context to train 100,000 Thai entrepreneurs and 2.5 million people in Southeast Asia on how to utilize AI by 2025. Now, I guess that means by the end of 2025. But you can imagine the campaign of insertion of Microsoft's tools and technologies, not only in infrastructure, but also in popular education about the use of AI using their platforms. That's a major development that I think we're going to see more of. And there's going to be countermeasures, by the way, I'm sure, from Chinese AI companies. And it's becoming a global competition to see who's going to be the infrastructure and or sort of thought leader provider of AI for various countries.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Andy, especially in the Southeast Asia region, because it has such a strong touch point for trade, commercial, everything that flows via the sea route that goes through there. So I can see how they would want that influence with AI touching everything in every industry, that they'd want to be in that area as well.
Well, I thought you were going to pick up another thing, Andy, because I know you've had it in your possession for a day, but I want to at least touch on it today, which is that a lot of people, including Andy, who's holding it up to the screen right now, have been getting the Rabbit R1 delivered. Now, I think we will probably do a show where we do a little bit deeper dive. Andy has not even had 24 hours with it at this point, so I think it would be unfair to get any sort of official reviews or anything like that at this point. But it has come out, and I think it's worth mentioning that there have been reviews of it. Marquise Brownlee, Riley Brown, although that was sponsored, so and some other ones have come out, and I would say that it's in the initial response has been in line with maybe the Humane Pin. There's some huge differences in terms of price and its subscription models and things like that I don't think makes it a fair one-to-one comparison. Actually, Marcus Brownlee does a good job of saying that as well. But at the same time, there's definitely been some negativity to it as well. So as they land in more people's hands, I think what we need is for more people to have hands-on experience of it. Maybe Andy, maybe others. We'll sort of track in different people on Twitter and LinkedIn and things like that to figure out how they're using it. And maybe they're going to come up with some really cool use cases that these first initial reviewers haven't thought of, or maybe we're thinking about it in a different way. So just wanted to bring that up. Andy, anything to add? I know you've only had it in your hands for a short while here, but anything to add about it?
Yeah, I think that it has some flat sides, and I'll describe a couple of those. But I do like this simple user experience of pressing the button, asking a question, and getting a response. So I'll demonstrate that somewhat here. Give me 3 lately released news items that are about the developments in the world of AI. So I'm waiting for that. It worked this morning.
That's all you got to look
try that again. R1, give me 3 news items about AI developments that were released in the last 10 days. It's blinking.
Live demo, folks.
Rabbit is blinking.
If you know, you know.
There you go. Live tech demos never fails.
That's not the problem. Okay, so now let me tell you some other flat sides of Rabbit R1. It's odd that it that's just a demo failure, because it was being quite responsive this morning when I was playing with it. Here's some problems with it. One is it has to be tethered to Wi-Fi in order to be functional. Or you can buy a SIM card that has a SIM card slot and have a 4G connection. And so I'm not willing to buy a whole extra line on my Verizon plan in order to get this to be connected to that. But when I tried to connect it to my phone as a hotspot, it doesn't show that network. It shows the networks here in the house, but it doesn't show that network. So I'm still struggling through that piece of it. Here's an interesting point. There was a lot of press about the relationship between Rabbit R1 and Perplexity. And so I assumed that when I would, ask a question of Rabbit R1, it would use Perplexity. Well, it's quite convinced that it does not. It does not use Perplexity in its responses. It uses its own LLM in order to provide those responses. And so it appears on the surface anyway, that the only connection is that you get a free year of Perplexity Pro. And to do that, you have to sign in with the email that you use to connect to your Rabbit R1 device. And so that didn't work for me. It could be that it was only the first 100,000 users, and I'm 101,000, 100,000 plus one, somewhere in there. And so I'm not qualified for it. And the other thing I'll just quickly mention is it suffers, as do many other large language models, from insufficient training and hallucination. So here's an example. There's a feature in this, I just stumbled upon it, which is last night I said, okay, make a note and I dictated the note. It said, okay, saving your note. And it saved the note. And I didn't know where it saved it. But I later found that those notes were saved into a thing called journal in my RabbitR1 account, which is called whole.rabbit.tech online. So there's actually a journal that I can use. And that's a pretty nice feature, just as like a dictation method to capture something that then is available on my desktop, on whole.rabbit.tech. But I then asked it to, save a note to my journal, and it said, I'm sorry, I don't have the ability to save notes. And I said, you do? You just did it. How can you say that I went on in this dialogue back and forth. It was insistent for about 5 minutes that it did not have that capability. One of the key features of it that's shown as the journal on R1's website. So, it eventually did. And it said, okay, I'm saving your note. And it showed up immediately in R1. So, or in the, on the web UI.
Well, I think what I'm seeing is we're seeing this is like, these are truly, they're shipping, alpha, beta versions, and then hoping that because of the design, now the R1 has a unique design to it. I give them a lot of credit because it has a distinct look to it, and what it is the second it whizzes by a screen. You're like, that's the Rabbit R1. If somebody pulled it out in public and you were at least aware of AI, there'd be no doubt you knew what that was, right? So good on them for that. I think they did a great job with it. But I think it's they're expecting to ride the hype and the initial purchasing power of them at $200 in order to make updates. I know that within the last, I think 24 hours, Andy, they just made an update that helps with the resting battery rate, because apparently the R1s were draining crazy fast, even when they were just in standby mode. And I guess they pushed an update that somebody was already saying on Verge has drastically fixed that. Great. That's great. I'm glad to see that there's future support and updates and stuff. I'll just be really curious, and I don't want to pick on any one device or anything like that with these AI devices. I just will be really curious to see, how many times the public will be willing to invest like a Kickstarter almost, knowing full blown that they're probably not going to deliver with the power that you might see in a carefully created, promo or pitch video or whatever. And then, are you willing to wait it out until it potentially gets better? I think it's interesting. It's what's going on right now. So it's definitely newsworthy. But obviously we'll learn more as Andy dives more into it as well on there. Okay, before we wrap it up, I think, Beth, I don't even know if I was going to say, Beth, I don't even know if we've got news from you. So what news do you want to share? We'll maybe wrap it up there unless anybody else has anything. Okay,
quick. Google released Med Gemini, which is a suite of AI models that are fine-tuned for healthcare. The comparison is it outperforms ChatGPT-4 or GPT-4. Again, and it outperforms them on 10 out of 14 tasks. Again, the new models that are coming out are compared to the old model of OpenAI as their benchmark. But it's fairly cool. It incorporates web search information, provides more reliable and up-to-date answers to complex medical questions. And it excels at analyzing medical images and videos and health records. So it's using that giant context window that Gemini was touting. So those kinds of things are really interesting. And then I have two sort of rumors based in fact. One is the appearance of GPT-2 and the disappearance of GPT-2 as a chatbot. If you were in the AI community, or at least on Twitter, there was a whole thing. This model appeared on lmsys.org, which is super niche. And you could try it, and it appeared on the 29th of April, and it disappeared on the 30th of April. In between those two times, Sam Altman tweeted, I have a soft spot for GPT-2. And in fact, he corrected it. So we have a soft spot for GPT-2, which is how OpenAI writes their model names. And then he corrected it to GPT-2, which was matched what was on which was on LMSIF. sis. And I have another one, but Karl, you unmuted. Did you want to comment on this?
No. No. That was the same thing I was just going to talk about really quickly. I have tried it though. It did solve though, because it was on chat.lmsys, I think .org, and it solved something that Opus and GPT-4 couldn't do. So it was really awesome. There's a whole bunch of back and forth of what it is, who it is. And then it also got into the Q. It's Q star plus GPT-2, and there's so much speculation on what it is. So it was a funny read throughout the 3 days or whatever days it was out in the wild for.
Yeah, no, and OpenAI, like we don't know whether it's OpenAI or not. The attribution was not known. So it's just this model that appears for a day and then disappears for a day, and Sam Altman just generally tweets about it. But it's like, again, watching, I think OpenAI just like, cool, we can surf this hype cycle, right? Like, we understand that. The second rumor base, in fact, is Apple has announced an event that's happening next week on May 7th. And it's called Let Loose. And as they do, they have not said exactly what they're going to talk about, but the idea is that it is likely announcing their new iPad line, which may or may not include the new chip. The logo, which is where you start to learn stuff, includes Let Loose, the name, and an iPad pencil, writing potentially amidst like celebratory colors is the best way I could describe that. So the idea, so that's part of the idea that it's the iPad, the new iPad 2024. That's what I got.
My guess is that iPad announcement will include local LLM built into the iPad.
And probably the M4 chip.
Yeah.
You think that'll happen in May?
I will know in a week.
I was like, well, I don't know. I mean,
maybe pre-order it, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, yes. I guess we'll find out. All right, well, that'll be our, let's see, what's next, the 8th. So that's happening on Tuesday. So we will be able to report back on that next Wednesday when we do our next news show. For today, we'll wrap that up. Hope you guys learned about some cool stuff going on over the last 7 days. Like I said, we do this every Wednesday. Coming up the rest of this week, tomorrow we have a show that sort of flips SaaS on its head, and we're going to be talking about service as a software. So if you're curious to know more about what that means, how AI is involved, come back tomorrow and check us out. On Friday, we have our 2-week recap show that we do every other Friday. This is a great time to pull up news stories that we didn't get to today. I think I have a few that I didn't necessarily get to because we talk longer on other ones. And Jyunmi's got a few as well. We'll pull those back in on Friday, as well as any other topics we talked about over the last 2 weeks. And I just want to give a quick plug as well for next Friday, the 10th, because that'll be our 200th show. And, we celebrated on number 100. We'll definitely come back and celebrate 200, 300, and then we'll do our 1-year anniversary when it comes up in August. I think it's August 7th. Don't quote me on that, but it's right around there. So we have some cool milestones coming up for the show. We continue to grow. Yesterday, we talked about how the DailyAIShow was mentioned on Forbes.com. So you can go back to yesterday and find out all about that, or go check it out on Forbes. So yeah, we're growing. We appreciate everybody, and we will see you tomorrow for another great show. Until then, have a great one, guys. Bye.
Aloha.